In this video, we'll explore Philae, the island, the goddess Isis and her spells, the Temple of Philae, mysterious rituals, and a surprising account of what took place during one of these rituals. Let's begin by heading to Egypt, in the southern region of the country, arriving in the city of Aswan. Aswan has the 15th largest population in the country and is located 893 kilometers south of Cairo by road or 685 kilometers by air. Philae is 10.7 kilometers south of Aswan, 8.1 kilometers by land and 2.6 by water. The boat trip offers beautiful views, and as we approach the island, the scenery becomes truly enchanting. Philae was one of the main centers of worship for the goddess Isis, which is why the goddess is so closely associated with the place. It was there that Isis performed many of her magical rituals and spells, including those from the myth of Osiris. The Temple of Philae was built in honor of Isis and continued to serve as a place of worship until the 6th century AD. Philae was once an ancient Egyptian city. The Temple of Philae was the island's most prominent monument, dedicated to the goddess Isis. Near the Temple of Isis, there are other temples, colonnades, ceremonial courtyards, smaller chapels, and various other spaces and monuments. The Temple of Philae remained in use until the year 537 AD. With the rise of Christianity in Egypt, the Temple of Philae was converted into a church and became dedicated to Saint Stephen. Today, due to the construction of the Aswan Dam, the original island is submerged, and what can be seen above the water level is just the tip of what used to be a cliff. The Temple of Philae is one of the best preserved monuments of ancient Egypt and would be in even better condition if it hadn't endured the damage from the period when it was underwater. The Aswan Dam served the needs of modern Egypt at the expense of the treasures of ancient Egypt. The dam was built to enable hydroelectric power generation and provide year-round irrigation. While it brought benefits, it also caused losses, especially when considering the monuments that were submerged by Lake Nasser. The damage could be even greater, depending on the possible existence of other archaeological treasures that may lie buried at the bottom of the lake. Lake Nasser is a vast reservoir and one of the largest artificial lakes in the world. It is so large that it spans the territories of two countries, each of which chose to give the lake a different name. The Egyptian portion, which makes up 83% of the total, is called Lake Nasser, while the Sudanese portion, accounting for the remaining 17%, is known as Lake Nubia. The lake is 479 kilometers long, and its widest point is 16 kilometers across. Lake Nasser flooded the island of Philae, but nearby, Agilkia Island remained intact. Agilkia Island is located about 300 meters from the original site of Philae. The island has a shape that resembles a sausage. It is a small island, roughly the size of a city block, measuring 298 meters in length and 160 meters at its widest point. With the flooding of Philae Island and the need to preserve its monuments, a massive effort was undertaken. The monuments of Philae were carefully dismantled, relocated, and reassembled on Agilkia Island. A mythology is the result of a story that eventually becomes a belief embraced by a people, becoming part of their cultural identity. The goddess Isis was one of the main figures in Egyptian mythology. Isis became a symbol of love, motherhood, spells, and magic. Together with Osiris, she was one of the most venerated deities in Egypt during the first millennium BC. The goddess Isis belonged to a family of deities, descending from the god Ra, the creator. Her siblings were Osiris, Set, and Nephthys, children of Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. One of Isis's spells appears in the myth of Osiris. Osiris was the king of Egypt, performing well as a ruler and beloved by the people. His brother Set, driven by envy and a desire for power, came up with a sinister idea and devised a plan to assassinate Osiris. He had a sarcophagus made with the exact measurements of his brother. Then he organized a gathering and challenged the guests to lie down inside the sarcophagus, saying he would give it as a gift to whoever fit perfectly. Here's a curious detail: who would even want such a morbid gift? Regardless of whether they truly wanted it or not, the guests accepted the challenge. When it was Osiris's turn, the moment he lay down, Set and his accomplices sealed the sarcophagus and threw it into the Nile River. In another version, Set finished the job by dismembering his brother and scattering the body parts across various places in Egypt. Devastated by the loss of her husband, Isis sets out in search of his remains and, through a spell, manages to bring about the symbolic resurrection of Osiris. From then on, Osiris comes to dwell in the Duat as the king of the underworld. In Egyptian mythology, the Duat is the realm where the souls of the dead go. As a final act, Isis prepares and protects her son Horus to reclaim power from Set and avenge the death of his father. The story of Osiris is depicted on the walls of the Temple of Philae through symbolic images, and the island became an important pilgrimage site. To strengthen the bonds of devotion, these stages of the myth of Osiris were periodically performed in public. Among other spells, when her son Horus falls ill, Isis appeals to the god Ra for help, declaring that if her son is not healed, she will alter the course of the sun. Isis also played a role in spells to help pregnant women have successful childbirths. Despite the importance of the myth of Osiris, the persuasive power behind devotion to the goddess Isis involved other qualities. She acted as a mother to the deceased, a maternal protector to the living, was described as a protector of the nation, even on battlefields, and possessed magical powers, among other attributes. Isis's fame grew to such an extent that she was associated with Aphrodite, had her name borrowed by Cleopatra III, and Cleopatra VII even called herself the new Isis. With the rise of Christianity, the worship of Isis came to an end, but the memory of Isis seems to have survived. Ancient Egypt is considered by many to be a wise civilization, and this wisdom is partly associated with Isis. Isis was used as a national symbol of Egypt during the 1920s and 1930s. Moreover, the material aspects related to her, such as the temples dedicated to her, along with the symbolic representations they contain, have continued to be points of historical and tourist interest. The mysteries of Isis were religious initiation rituals performed in the worship of the goddess Isis. While the public rites were ceremonies known to the general population, such as the worship of cult statues in their temples, the mystery rites were secret rituals that the general public did not know about, and those who had participated were forbidden from revealing. In the mystery rites, experiences designed to cause strong emotional impacts were used. For example, the initiate would be subjected to complete silence and absolute darkness during the night, which would then be suddenly interrupted by a bright light and a soaring sound. The intention was for the emotional impact to provide an intense religious experience that the initiate could interpret as direct contact with the god to whom they were devoted. On the other hand, the most common ritual was the daily offering, in which priests, dressed according to the deity's cult traditions, presented food offerings. It is believed that by participating in these rituals, devotees were assured by the goddess Isis that their souls would have a happy life after death. In general terms, there was a very strong persuasive power. It was said that the goddess Isis had power over fate. Devotees went through the streets singing praises to Isis, and as a form of penance, publicly confessed their sins. The sick would sleep in the temple, hoping that Isis would heal their illnesses. Others acted similarly, hoping the goddess would appear to them in a dream and offer guidance. As a result, the rituals and worship of the goddess Isis spread beyond Egypt, reaching the Greco-Roman territories. The mystery rituals consisted of an exhaustive sequence of activities. A certain initiate of a mystery rite decided to share his experience during the ritual and described it as follows. In the initiation rite, a series of purifications took place as preliminary activities before the actual process began. During these purifications, the priest would wash the initiate, ask the gods for forgiveness on their behalf, and sprinkle them with water. The rituals were not limited to these activities. The priests of Isis had shaved heads and wore white linen garments, which were requirements of ritual purity. The initiate abstains from eating meat and drinking wine for 10 days. On the night of the 10th day, the initiate puts on a white linen tunic and enters the deepest part of the temple. From this point, the initiate recalls that they are not allowed to describe all the details and proceeds with a vague description, mentioning that they reach the border of death, what could be the threshold between death and rebirth, travel through all the elements, and then return. The initiate takes on the role of Osiris by undergoing a symbolic death experience. They travel to the underworld and the heavens, see the sun amidst darkness, and thus come closer to the gods. After this experience, they emerge, and the priests dress them in an embroidered cloak and open the curtains, where the initiate faces a crowd of fellow devotees. The initiation process is completed over the next 3 days with a series of banquets and sacred meals shared with the new companions. To conclude, in terms of cultural and religious tourism, the experience at the monuments of Philae is fantastic. Exploring the Old World is already an incredible experience, and when it involves monuments and mythological figures of great historical significance, such as these Egyptian deities, it is definitely worthwhile. Philae has become one of Egypt's most popular destinations, attracting thousands of visitors. We'll end here. Until our next journey. To conclude.